Hey, I will sit at the ramp all day and back your boat in the water for $5 a pop. Check us out on this episode.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
I tell you what, if a young kid knows how to back a boat, he can make a lot of money in the summertime by just offering to help people out at the boat ramp. Welcome back to the OneCast. Welcome. It's Ben. We got Pete and Trey here today. We were going to talk a little bit of fishing etiquette, but we got some other things to cover first. We had a lot of big things happen here in the fishing industry in the last couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about it. But just a second, remember, join that snagless revolution. Go over to onecastfishing.com. Use that code, the OneCast at checkout, and save 10%.
10.
I
give it a 10. Full 10%.
You threw him off. 10%.
You did throw me off.
10% off. Yep. So Seminole, Big O, Elites.
Yeah, there was so those paying attention to tournament season started for the professional anglers, and Bassmaster, the Elites, have already had 2 tournaments back to back. Okeechobee, the Big O, and then this last weekend they were on Seminole. And Pete, you want to tell the guys who won?
Tyler Rivet won Okeechobee, and Joey Cifuentes won down there on Seminole. Both of them, plug your ears, Randy Blockett, using Forward Facing Sonar in order to capture those dubs, which to me is really cool because everybody thought Okeechobee, Seminole, sight fishing, shallow water flipping. I'm going to apologize, not everybody, my voice allergies. It's that time of year here.
But
they all thought flipping, shallow water, sight fishing. And a lot of guys caught good fish doing that. But these 2 guys in 2 tournaments went out and found something completely different, and they capitalized on that opportunity, and they won. Joey Cifuentes, a rookie on the Elites, wins his 2nd tournament he fishes, and Tyler Rivet captured his first Elite series. I think this is his 3rd year on the Elites.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
it just goes to show you, both those guys were catching fish 15 to 24, 25 feet deep. Sure, yeah, they were using forward-facing sonar, but a lot of the other guys were fishing shallow, and there was a lot of spawning fish going on. You can fish offshore, and you catch big bags when everyone else is on the bank. So I thought it was definitely a pretty cool event to be able to see that.
I'm interested to see how they flip that into cheating, since that's what everybody says. Forward-facing sonar is cheating. I don't know how you cheat finding fish somewhere where they live, but you know.
I think it was cool to see, like, they didn't have to manage fish as much as somebody who's in a sight fishing tournament, right? Like they found a group of fish, several groups of fish. But I think Tyler Rivet in the first event, like he found like 100-yard stretch in 20 foot of water leading up to where there was crappie over brush piles. But he accidentally found that when he was going crappie fishing to feed the guys at night, because that's what he did, right? He cooked the food and stuff. So he went out there and accidentally stumbled onto something that he put together as being his primary game plan, and it worked out for 4 days, right? And then you transition to Seminole, and Joey Cifuentes, like the cowboy himself, like found something offshore on Seminole that no one else was doing.
And it's not like no one... It's that time of season now. I'm coughing. Hey, I did want to say... Allergies are good. That means the spawn's coming.
That's right.
It's right around the corner. The pollen's out. The pollen's on the water.
But you better be forward-facing sonar.
Yes. But what was interesting about Joey on Seminole, I didn't get to watch live as much this past weekend, but they were talking one in the mornings. He'd actually moved up because I think he caught a big enough bag. He just went fishing. But during practice, there were other guys around in that depression pond, whatever it was there, that big hole in the channel. But they were fishing the edges of it where it drops off with jerk baits, chatterbaits, and all, and he was dragging out in the middle of it and just something different. And
with a hand-poured morning dawn drop shot worm and just went to work.
You don't say morning dawn. Is that what you said?
Morning dawn. I know it's tough to believe that it was that color, but
I mean, who would have thought, right? Drop shotting down in Florida and in Georgia. Like you think big line, big tungsten weights, big flipping hooks, and he's out there finessing them. And hey, it worked out.
I can also say he was probably another week and that pattern wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
Like eventually those fish are going to move up. And everybody, if you listen to all the guys that fished at Talk, it was really weird. Like the water got so warm so fast, the fish didn't really know what they were doing. They wanted to spawn, but it wasn't quite right. So there was they were it was a tough, like Iaconelli didn't have anything, he said, in practice. And then he found some fish pre-spawn in a ditch and ended up catching enough to fish all 3 days. And, and it was, it may not work every time down there, but it worked this time. And that's all that matters.
That is something to talk about too. I know we don't usually talk about the non-winners, but think about Ike, man. Like, he made a pretty good comeback. Actually, he had 2 first good events, right?
Yeah.
He didn't do too bad in the Big O. And then in Seminole, he was there on day 4, I want to say, right?
He was he finished 10th. He was top 10.
Yeah. So, I mean, he went out there and he adjusted. I remember watching him live and he goes, we can't be here. We're going to die here. Right. And he made that on the fly adjustment, and he ran new water. And he caught fish as soon as he got to that water, and that boosted his confidence, and he weighed in a good bag. And hey, man, hats off to Mike Iaconelli.
You don't get to fish at that level for more than 20 years without knowing when to make those moves. So
make a few adjustments.
Yeah, I think he struggled a little bit with that last year after a few years off of the 5-fish tournament and not tournament fishing at all. But he looks like he's got it back. So
for you guys, I got to ask you, and this is for the viewers too. Does sometimes it feel like a breath of fresh air when somebody who has never won before wins an event like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It goes back, I think I've talked about this on a podcast before, but those guys who came in 2019, right, 18, 19, whenever MLF took a lot of the Bassmaster guys, there's a lot of guys who got pulled up to the elite level that would have never made it. Just because there were so many openings, and a couple of those guys have won multiple tournaments already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a lot of big sticks all over the place. And talking about Seminole, like if you look at the bottom 10, bottom 15, there were some big names down there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Seminole, it was very good for some folks, but it was very tough. I think it was weird fishing kind of overall.
Yeah.
Down there.
And much like Rick Clunn is Cody Huff's mentor, Larry Nixon is Joey Cifuentes' mentor, right? So it was pretty cool to see somebody who's brand new to the Elite Series, rookie year. His mentor is Larry Nixon, mega bucks himself, and he goes and wins the second event of the year. That's pretty cool. So,
and speaking of new guys winning tournaments, now Trey, you didn't win this weekend, but you fished your first Piedmont Bass Classic on Jordan Lake, ran by FLO Outdoors, one of our buddies, Doug. But you went out and fished it. You're fishing it this year. You finished 12th on Saturday.
correct.
You caught 2 7-pounders?
Yeah. It was, I got to give a huge shout out to the Piedmont Bass Classics guys. Doug runs a pretty good event, and it was a thick field on Jordan Lake. And for the viewers and those watching, like if you don't know Jordan Lake, North Carolina, this time of year, it pumps out giant bags. So for me, it was the first big tournament that I fished in 3 years. And the field was stacked. It's a team event, which makes it really cool, right? Like fishing as a team. And I know I got a lot of crap from the viewers before on the co-angler stuff, but this is not like that. You're fishing as a team. So it's cool to have all those fish count for your team. But yeah, you're right. We finished 12th out of 54 boats. I thought that was a really good deal. We only weighed in 4 fish, but the 4 fish that we weighed in were close to 19 pounds. The winners of the event, though, stuck over a 30-pound bag for 5 fish. And hats off to those guys. They know how to do it. These guys have been fishing these bodies of water for 20, 30 years, and they just know where the fish live. I think they can name the fish in the water.
Yeah, the guys that won with a 30-pound bag Saturday and 28-pound Sunday.
Yep.
And they won last year the same 2 tournaments with a 37-pound bag one day and like a 32-pound bag the next day. They've got that bite figured out.
I mean, I stand by this. When I was doing that Best Bass Lake in every state series a couple of years ago, Jordan was my top lake in the state for North Carolina, and I still think it is. Hal caught, he was fun fishing, but 38 pounds.
Yeah.
On like a Tuesday afternoon or whenever he was out there.
I think Falls is catching up.
Yeah.
Some of the bags they put out last year, I'm interested to see what it does this year, but it was right there with Jordan last year. So
and
you
Harris,
could have 2. Harris is...
It's gone downhill.
Yeah, it's dead.
Hey. You can fun fish Harris.
That's 38 pounds. So that brings me to something we wanted to talk about. And the state of North Carolina is looking to partner with fishermen for a F1 bass stocking program. If you don't know what an F1 bass is, it's a mix between a Florida bass and a northern strain. So it's the first generation of their offspring. They They want to do it on 3 lakes. Lake Norman, which is infested with spotted Alabama bass. Jordan, which does not have spotted bass. And Gaston, which is infested with spotted bass. I'm going to give my 2 cents and say I don't think they need to put those fish in Jordan. I don't think they're going to do well. And when you're talking 30-plus pound bags, here's the thing. And a lot of anglers want to go out and catch 100 fish a day, and that's great, and that's part of what got us to this problem. But
Why do we want F1 bass?
growth, well, for Gaston and Norman, it's because of the Alabama bass. They're trying to push those fish out.
They want bigger bass.
They want
right?
bigger bass. They want to get rid of the non-native spotted bass, and they've had success. Where was that, Trey?
So in Texas and Tennessee, let's kind of rewind a little bit, right? So we got a group of fishermen, former professional anglers and stuff that have kind of taken the initiative to put together a program that works with, a federally certified 501c3 nonprofit organization to support the North Carolina Wildlife Commission, right? These professional anglers got together and created their own little co-op where they've traveled nationally, and they saw the success from introducing Florida strain F1 bass. Like Pete said, a mixture between Florida and northern bass. They've seen the introduction into some of those fisheries really be successful, primarily in Texas. We all know Texas grows giant bass. Look at Lake Ivy. Right? Or any of those lakes, Sam Rayburn, Fork, all that stuff.
And Texas does a really good job, the Texas Wildlife Commission, or whatever they call it over there.
No, I think you're right.
They care about fishing. They care about the bass population. They care about angling. It's not the same in a lot of states. Let's just put it that way.
What's interesting about that, though, is if you talk to biologists from any other state about the share Lunker program, they'll straight tell you that it has zero effect on what they're doing down there, and it's just a marketing thing.
I'm not just talking about share Lunker.
Oh, I know, but what I'm saying is like that's what everybody talks about when they talk about Texas. Oh, they got the share Lunker. They're putting the offspring of all these big fish.
Yep.
That's just a marketing deal, guy. Like that is not why Texas is good as it is. Texas is good as it is for why Ben's about to say.
Well, let's take hydrilla, for instance, right? Hydrilla is an invasive species in North Carolina and pretty much all over the country, including Texas. But they are not, as I understand it, because I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and podcasts on it, especially after they did that study. And there's been a lot of information come out recently, but that the results of the study at Toledo Bend, I was watching that a year ago and watching a lot of the Texan wildlife guys. And the hydrilla, like they're not going out to killing it. They're trying to manage it because they know how good it is for the species. They're not allowed to bring in any more hydrilla, but they're trying to manage
They're managing what they have.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they manage, like you look at a lake like Fork, Toledo Bend with the timber, and they do what they can to protect that and to have habitat for those fish. And it's like you said, it's not something you see every state do. Again, I don't necessarily think that money spent in Jordan is necessary. Jordan's a tough fishery, don't get me wrong. But I think it's a really healthy fishery. You may not go out and catch 100 stunted bass a day, but I mean, if you catch, as well as I do, if you catch 5 or 6, you've caught at least one pretty good one. You're not going out and catching 5 13-inchers. You're going to have more. I honestly, right hand to God, don't know if I've caught more than one fish out of Jordan Lake that's under 2 pounds. If I think back about all the times I fish, and I throw a lot of bigger baits, and I'm looking for bigger bites because I don't like fun fishing Jordan that much. I like to go out there and tournament fish because you can catch bigger fish. So I'm throwing different baits to get those bigger bites. But I just don't see and catch a lot of those little fish. I can think of 2, honestly, under 2 pounds that I've ever caught in the 4 years I've been down here and fishing it pretty regularly.
And there's a lot of anglers that don't agree with the F1 bass initiative, particularly in Jordan Lake. And the reason being is because, like Pete talked about, we have giant sacks of fish, and that's all throughout the year that come out of Jordan. It's not just in the pre-spawn time. Like in the summertime, you're still seeing 25, 28-pound bags. At the Wednesday or Tuesday nighters, I think it is, you're still seeing 3 fish in the summertime weigh 19 pounds, right? I think a lot of people have an issue with Jordan specifically because they're like, why fix what's broken? Right.
What isn't broken.
Or why, don't fix what isn't broken, right?
The other thing for me is the lack of like protected areas for those fish. So we don't have grass in Jordan. You have very limited brush and thing that is in livable water throughout the year because of how much sediment has settled now. Unless the lake's high, most of the brush that used to be in the water and provided for frying those smaller fish, because I think they were 4 to 6 inch fingerlings or something like that.
Yeah,
there's just not a lot of places for those fish to hide, and you've got big bass, you've got big carp, you've still got people might not know, but there's still a bunch of good stripers and they're giant catfish. There's some big old crappie in there that'll eat a 4 or 5 inch bass. Mm-hmm. It's tough for me to see the cost to what the benefit could be. When you're talking, what do we say, 25,000?
So for the numbers that we're tracking right now, like the co-op has a goal of $150,000 to $160,000 to stock 4 to 6 fingerlings per, what is it, hectare or
I think it's hectare,
yeah,
however you say that.
Per acre, right? Per
so it's about 2 acres.
So they want to take $150,000 to $160,000 and stock it with set amount of fingerlings, F1 fingerlings.
So in Jordan, that's what, 25,000?
Probably. I mean,
roughly. If you figure it's 2.5 acres and you're doing how many 4 to 6 per acre? That's what, 18,000 acres.
Yeah, and look, I don't know. We'd have to have a biologist on here to talk about that the fish habitat issue and the survivability and if that's really going to work. Obviously, if they're working in commission with the wildlife, they probably mitigated some of that. But I'm with you, Jordan. I think it's a very healthy fishery. Norman, I mean, makes sense. They've already been stocking F1s in Norman, and you can go catch them if you run up the river and all to largemouth territory. Gaston, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And for the viewers, provide your input. Like, we're not biologists by any means, but, I think the reason for Jordan is because of the habitat, because it is so rich in nutrients that they think that the F1s are going to thrive there. And maybe the overall goal is to harvest them from Jordan and plant them into other lakes eventually. I don't know. We don't know, right? We definitely see the benefit with Lake Norman. We definitely see the benefit with Gaston. But we even talked about earlier, and Ben brought up a good point. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Yadkin chain, and that consists of High Rock Lake, Tuckertown, Baden Lake, and Tillery, or maybe flip-flop the two.
You're right.
Those are the 4 primary lakes in the Yadkin chain. And there have been Alabama spotted bass caught in those fisheries, right?
yeah, I mean, every once in a while, I think a couple will show up. It's mostly largemouth, and I haven't fished in a couple of years, but it's one of those lakes that like Tillery, for instance, is a numbers lake. You go there, you catch numbers, you can usually limit out, but the winner of a lot of like club tournaments are 12 to 15 pounds in the spring. Now local guys will someone will get 20-pound bags, but it's not your Jordan Lake where the winners have to have 30 pounds to win.
Yeah.
So if they're going to do it, I would love to see the Yadkin chain. It's also relatively close to it. It's about an hour and a half west.
Jordan interests me too because one of the guys heading this, and I know we said there were some people, but Marty Stone is one of the guys that's part of the nonprofit that's kind of heading it, and he's a local guy. And when MLF was here for the heavy hitters a few years ago, he talked at length on camera multiple times about the lack of cover for fry and fingerling fish in Jordan Lake because of how much sediment was in the lake. And he said the same with falls, that they need to raise those lakes 3 feet, the Corps Engineers does, in order to provide that habitat for the fish. So it's kind of like a conflicting thing. You're saying that we don't have the habitat for the fish that are naturally being spawned there, but now we're going to go put a bunch of fish in there that are going to compete even more for that. So that's where my conflict comes with Jordan. It's not that I'm wholeheartedly against it. I just don't. I feel like there's some other things that if anybody's local and a fish Jordan and knows, if Corps would raise that lake 3 feet, think about how much better that lake would be.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know we love fishing. When that water level is 3 feet high, go to the bushes.
Yeah,
that's right.
And the bushes are in the water. You can get you can get to the creek mouths where the feeder streams are coming in. Those creek ditches are now fishable. It's not just that it's fishable, but now there's more places for those fry, those fingerling. There's more spawning areas opened up.
And it wouldn't be, it's obviously an issue when you're raising water levels and all, but there's no development on Jordan and really none on falls.
No.
So the potential is there to be able to do that.
I just don't know if they're taking into consideration like the dam and because I do know that if any of you know the dam that's at Jordan Lake that feeds into the Cape Fear, is it the Cape Fear? Yeah,
Eventually
the Cape Fear. Well, you have a town called Lillington that's down the way. If that dam were ever to break, Lillington would be underwater, right? And they talked about that before, specifically when we had some of the hurricanes coming through. But, I think what we're saying is like, we're not sure what the return on investment would be to take fishermen's money. And what they're asking for is 3,000 bass fishermen on an annual basis to donate $100 to this program to continue funding the F1 bass to be introduced into Jordan, Norman, and Gaston, and probably eventually other fisheries, right? But we don't really know what the return on investment would be. So, take that into consideration. If you've looked at this, there's some articles that are published on this. This is a good conversation because this could change our bass fisheries 10 to 15 years down the road, because those F1 bass grow quick.
Yep.
And they have very quick, but they have metabolisms that allow them to grow quick, flourish in cold water, flourish in the summer heat, and they're a prime predator to eat up a bunch of spotted bass. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I think the spots in Norman would crush them. I just think
there's
they
bigger
would crush
spots
them.
in Gaston now too.
Yeah. So it's something to think about, but that's what they're asking for. This co-op that's supporting, this nonprofit that's supporting the Wildlife Commission. They want to get anglers money for a good reason, right?
Yeah, let's make it clear. Like what they're trying to do, we 100% support.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
I think all of us as anglers, and I hope everyone listening, like we want to make our fisheries better.
Absolutely.
We just want to be, the most prudent and efficient and do it the best way we can.
I'm
And
gonna
these
make
conversations
sure
are important.
If I'm donating $100 a year over the next 5 years, that money they're being fiscally responsible with it.
Absolutely.
And that it makes sense. And I don't, we're trying to get one of the biologists that's part of this in to talk, and I think we have that worked out. So we'll hopefully be able to bring you some more info on it. And maybe it's something for folks outside North Carolina. You can go to your biologist and say, hey, they're doing this. What will we have to do to get started here? This isn't just the F1 bass can live all the way up through Maine in those cold, freezing temperatures. So,
in talking with Corey when we were down at ICAST,
yeah,
and he's part of this. He's the North Carolina. I forget his exact title, but he's the biologist, fishery biologist. But he was saying, the reason why a lot of states, including North Carolina, can't do what like Texas does, it comes down to resources, financial. They don't get the budget from the state. So we're trying to, this organization, which I think is great, is trying to find a way to help supplement that. So these are great conversations. Hopefully we as a community can continue to improve our bass fisheries, just so, everyone can enjoy the hobby for many more generations to come.
That's true.
So we talked about like part of the reason they're doing this. That was a really loud pop. I apologize. Is Norman and Gaston spotted bass invasive, and the issue there was anglers transporting fish either into the rivers above those bodies of water or into those bodies of water directly. We saw it in the Great Lakes with zebra mussels, which luckily turned into be not a terrible thing because they helped clean up and filter some of the water. But still, you don't want to transport them to other bodies where they're non-native. So clean your stuff out. Don't start bringing fish to lakes they don't belong in. I'm fairly certain I've caught spots in Sharon Harris. I'm almost 100% positive.
I thought I did too one time.
And when I talked to Corey about it, he said you probably did because of where they are in the river. There's a good chance that they end up in Sharon Harris. They have not made it to Jordan yet.
I mean, it's hard when they get in the river system. Like eventually they're going to end up, in our bodies of water. But a lot of times they end up in the river systems all because anglers move them there because they just want to catch more fish.
Yep.
And they end up doing more harm than good.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a fish out of a lake and put it in your private pond, it's not going to have the serious negative effects as it is like, oh, you know what? Let's grab these spots, take them to Bugs Island or Carr Lake, whatever, and drop them in there. The reproduction rate of an Alabama spotted bass is significantly quicker than a lot of the other species of fish, right? They eat. They're extremely aggressive. They will destroy bait fish. They're like a spot or a smallmouth on steroids, man. Like they really are. So like Pete said, not only clean your stuff out, wipe it down, don't transport bacteria and other invasive species from one lake to the next, but don't transport fish from one lake to the next because you want to catch more or bigger fish. It's not going to work out. And all you're going to do is negatively impact all the fisheries throughout your state. And potentially, I mean, look at what happened with the Asian carp deal, right? In Kentucky and Tennessee.
Look at Norman at tournament weights, like from when it was an all largemouth lake to where we're at now, where, I mean, it was a lot like Jordan. You needed 25, 30 pounds.
Yep.
Now, an 18-pound bag is a big bag, and that's usually some bigger spots and then a couple kicker largemouth. But I think it's starting to get a little bit better. Gaston is. Some of the F1s are doing fairly good for when they did the first stocking, but some of those spots are just getting giant in Norman. And Gaston, I haven't fished it a lot. I fished it last year, and there's plenty of spots in that lake. And I mean, I caught a pile of them, and there's a pile of them that are that big, 12 inches, and they run in a pack of 300, a whole school of 300. And, I mean, I went through 97 drop shot weights, I think, in that tournament weekend, because you'd have one hit the bait, one hit the drop shot weight.
They're not inside the fish.
Well, they're not. They are probably. I can't control what they do when they eat the weight. Oh yeah. No, they didn't go in when I weighed them, but
so clean your boat out. Don't transport fish to another body of water. And we're going to talk about that. Transitions right into etiquette. Right?
Yeah.
Fishing etiquette. The unwritten rules that exist, right? The laws are there. They're black and white. Clean your stuff. Don't transport fish. Creel limits, 5 fish limit, whatever. But the unwritten rule of bass fishing and fishing in general,
boating even in general.
So we're going to talk about that. And I know the viewers really wanted to hear our thoughts on that. And we all have our own opinions, and we all have some stories that we can tell. Let's start at the ramp, right? Okay. Let's start at the ramp. When you take your boat, right, and we're not kayakers, right? We're boaters.
This goes for kayaks too.
This goes for kayaks. When you take your boat and you roll into the ramp, if you're the first person there, right, and you have it all to yourself because you're like me and you like to get to the water 2.5 hours early so you can idle out there, get to your spot and sit on and spot lock, you pretty much have the ramp to yourself. But if you're loading up on a weekend day, or a tournament day, and you pull up, what do you, Ben, for your like own internal procedures, what do you do?
Yeah, so typically, like, if it's not raining that day, I mean, I'll make sure I'll put the plug in the boat before I even pull out from the house. And then a lot of times I'll have my rods already strapped down. Depends on how far I actually have to travel. But regardless, when I show up to the ramp, I pull off to the loading, unloading zone. I unstrap everything. I put everything that I want up on the boat that I'm going to need immediately. So if I have to tie up to the ramp, I'm going to pull my rope out, and it's going to be already set up. In fact, I'll probably already tie it up to one of the cleats. Maybe not. Like if it's really busy, and I don't know which dock which side I'm going to tie up on. But it's all going to be there. So when you back down into the water, you unload, you hop on, and you're good to go. It should take no more than 5 minutes to do that. And we've all seen it, and it's okay, right, to take your time and all, as long as you're not backing people up. Like, don't do it in the ramp.
I don't care if it takes you 9 hours to unload your truck and put everything in your boat. Don't back down the ramp and then do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think we should even rewind from driving your boat to the ramp. If you're a new boat owner, go practice backing your boat up in a parking lot or something like that. Because what Ben talked about was streamlining the process, right? Being selfless, like making sure that he can get in the water and out of everyone else's way, because they're also trying to enjoy their day. But if you're that guy or gal that goes out and buys your brand new boat and has never practiced before, and you're taking Peter Griffin hours to back your boat into the water, and you have to make a 120-point turn to back straight, you probably need to go do some practicing. So before you even strap your rods down, before you even put your plug in your boat, go practice with your trailer, right?
Yeah. Go to a big parking lot, practice there, practice your driveway. And then if you feel like you need to take it to the next level, go to the ramp, go early in the morning on a weekday or something when you know no one's going to be there. Yeah. And then practice and become efficient. So if you're fishing tournaments or it's the weekend and really busy, we all know how it is in the summertime.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Right? The line's a quarter mile, half mile back. Actually, I've been in tournaments where it's been like a mile long line for the boat ramp. So you just want to be efficient. and because keep everybody calm. Everybody be calm. Get on the water. Go have a great day. We don't want to get,
Yeah, people struggling to back up doesn't bother me as much as the guys that keep their boat covered and then back down the ramp and then want to uncover their boat. And then they get
I don't
their
think
boat.
I've seen that one.
I haven't seen that. Yeah.
Then they get their boat uncovered and then they got to take everything out of their truck and put it in there. I mean, I literally watched a guy at Pose one morning while there's 2 tournaments trying to watch, take an entire ramp for a good 35 minutes while he took his cover off his boat. And did all this other stuff. And, there's a line now up to the main road coming down into Pose, and everybody's mad. And, if you struggle a couple times to back up, somebody's probably going to say, hey, do you want me to do that for you? Or, hey, cut it this way, cut it that way. I'll help those folks because it happens. I mean, I've been backing boats up since I was 12 years old, and there's times where it's like I forget, and you're like, what am I doing? And you're all, you end up all cockeyed and crazy. But
you can always do it the old Marty Stone way. Just back in and let the boat float off and ask somebody to take you to your boat.
yeah, that works too.
It's a technique, right?
Don't do that unless you got buddies there.
And shut your dang headlights off, please. When you back down the ramp in the morning, shut your headlights off because that'll shut down the other ramps close to you if it's a multi-ramp launch, just because you can't see anything at night when your headlights are pointed up in the air like this and somebody's trying to back in at the the next slot next to you. So have your stuff ready, like Ben said. Pull off to the side in the prep area, take your straps off. It takes me 5 minutes to get everything unstrapped, plug, I turn all my graphs on so that everything's booted up and ready to go, and then I'll put it in the water. But when that guy that morning, I'll never forget him. It was a Ranger boat too. Back down there has big fancy Ranger cover on there.
Oh, this is a bass boat?
Oh, it was a bass boat. Yeah. It wasn't a lake lice boat. It wasn't a wake boat or anything. It was a guy that bass fishes, and he wasn't an older guy or anything. It was, probably just a little bit older than us, but yeah, back down there with the cover on, and it wasn't he wasn't new to boating. I mean, the boat was older. He swung it right in at Jordan, which is, you guys know, isn't the easiest ramp at Pose to swing one shot into because it's kind of a funky turn there. I mean, he one shot backed it right in there and then just jumped out of his truck and went and started taking his cover off. And I thought he was going to launch it and moor it with the cover on or something. I didn't know what he was doing. And he kept his headlights on the whole time.
I think the important message is you can't control what anyone else does, but you can control what you do. You can practice with your trailer. You can get on Google and look at what your ramp is going to look like, especially if you go to a new body of water. I mean, Pete took me to the Roanoke River. Never been there before in my life. And I was like, ooh, this could be challenging, right? Look at the map, find out where you're going, right? Do some studying and then prep your equipment. Pete talks about backing down the ramp. If someone else's headlights are on, you cannot see out of your rear or side mirrors. You can't, right? And also, by the way, just when you turn your headlights off, a lot of trucks' fog lights don't turn off either. So push your button in if you have a Ford F-150 or whatever truck you're driving. Just because you turn your headlights off doesn't mean they all turn off. And that is just showing common courtesy to the rest of the anglers out there or whoever's putting boat in because you can't see, right? So control what you can control. So ramp etiquette, streamlined, get your stuff ready, get in the water. And then what do you guys do if you're by yourself? Like, how do you load your boat or offload your boat and tie it up? Where do you tie it up on the ramp?
I usually try to beach it.
Okay.
But you don't want to tie it up in the ramp. Right. I've seen guys back them down themselves and they power pull down and then they drive off and the ramp's still blocked and it takes them 45 minutes to come back. I actually moved a dude's boat at Jordan. So
I mean, I've seen that happen a lot.
At Pose, there's 4, and then they have the dock. Well, he backed down. It was a busy morning. He backed down the one right next to the dock, barely got it off the trailer, tied it off, and then left. And I mean, he was gone. My boat was launching everything he was gone for 10 minutes, and people were getting all mad. So I just went over and moved his boat for him.
Personally, I like to beach them just because.
Hey, I beach mine.
I don't have to get the rope out. You just push off, right? Super easy to get on and off. You're out of the way from the actual boat dock. Each boat dock's different, so it's all situational. It's situational. If the courtesy dock is away from the ramp, go to that. If there's not, because we know there's some ramps that the courtesy docks are just there at the ramp. So what you want to do, you want to tie up as far back as you possibly can, because that when you go park your boat and you rush back down there, someone else can still back in and untie theirs and tie theirs up.
That's right.
And then you back off and go wherever you got to go. So you just want to be, I guess the best principle is be courteous and try to make the least inconvenience for other people.
Yeah, and for you kayak folks, same thing. Pull over, take your crates and all that stuff out in that boat loading zone. That way you can back it down, and whatever you do. So one thing on kayaks that I've seen: don't back down to the edge of the water. Set your kayak on the ramp and then pull away and just leave it there out of the water.
You can't see it.
Yeah, one, you can't see it, and two, you're still blocking that ramp.
Yep.
Take it. Every ramp has somewhere you can. I
have seen that.
You can beach it or whatever. So, take it, drag it, tie it off to the dock, drag it over to the side and beach it, whatever it is. But don't just put it on land, because I'm telling you right now, I've started down ramps somebody's backing me in, and you look and you're like, oh, hey, whoa, and there, there's a kayak there, and that's going to be a $6,000 crunch. So yeah, think about that if you're a kayak angler. Just use the same principles. I don't mind sharing the ramps with them. I think it's great that more people are getting in the water, but it doesn't. You can't act differently because you have a smaller vessel or whatever. Yeah. You still have to be respectful.
A couple things that, again, this isn't written, right? This is just experience, right? Common sense plays a lot. You really can't buy that anywhere. You just got to learn it. But you're naturally going to get into a rhythm, right? After you're a boat owner, or a kayak owner, or a vessel owner for some period of time. The best thing you can do is get in a rhythm. Like, the way I start my boat is from the front left corner all the way. I work my way around to the front right corner, and I make sure everything is good to go. And then I back into the water, and then I go to the courtesy ramp or whatever the case may be. The second thing I would say is don't be afraid to help somebody out, right? And I've done that several times where there's somebody struggling at the ramp, or maybe it's an elderly person, and as well as I do, the mobility goes away when you hit about 70 something years old, or like mine's going away right now. Don't be afraid to help somebody out, right? Like, I think it's amazing because the bass fishing world, or angling in general, it's surrounded with a bunch of good people. Get out there and help somebody out, man. They may learn something. You may learn something too. Absolutely. So you're on the ramp, you got your truck parked, right? I don't know if there's any etiquette with parking your truck. Just park in the lines.
Yeah, park in the lines.
Make sure your trailer isn't blazing over, right? I've had people hit my trailer.
And if you hit somebody,
leave a note.
The other thing,
you've had an issue, right?
Broke my
tail lights out. Just leave a note. They're not that expensive.
Yeah.
If everybody else is backed into their spot at the ramp, back your truck and boat into, because you have created a logistical nightmare if everybody's backed in and you pull in.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think you would, but it screws. It's tough to back out if you're backed in. It's tough to pull out if the guy next to you pulls in it.
Well, you bring up a great point, right? So Saturday, and Ben and Pete talked about this. We fished that PBC event. We launched out of the Farrington boat ramp, which is the farthest ramp on Jordan Lake. Everybody backs into the spots there, right? It's a nightmare to back into those spots.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely a nightmare. And I hate that ramp. I do not I would much rather launch out of any other ramp out of Jordan.
I have no idea why people back in on
I
that
don't
ramp.
know either, right? But I do know this. If you do pull into the spot, it creates a slinky effect, and you're waiting there like legitimately jumping out of, weighing your fish in and then jumping back in the truck because the line hasn't moved, right?
Yep.
And this is for a local level event. So, follow suit if you see that, right? Like Pete was saying, follow suit. They're doing it for a reason, right? Creates a good flow.
Launch, truck's parked.
Yep. Now you're out on the water.
I want to talk about one thing with running, and we saw it at the last Elite event. So I can't remember whose boat it was, but I saw the interview with him, and he was running down, and there was a local running in front of him, and the local never looked, just turned and cut right in front of him, and he had to put his boat into the woods. Luckily, a bunch of guys got out and pushed his skeeter bass boat out of the woods, and he fished the rest of the tournament. And,
I did.
And it was just a couple scratches. But so if you're running, especially tournament, there's other folks around, even a morning when there's a busy ramp, before you cut across a leg or do anything crazy, look. If you're following, be smart, pay attention. I always try to run in line with the boat in front of me and not off to the side or whatever. One, the wake's not as bad if you're directly behind them. If it makes me have to run a little slower because it's a slower boat, I'll wait till I have a point to pass them. But when you start stacking, like you see guys do, because everybody wants to race, all it takes is that one guy saying, nope, this is my hole, And now this guy doesn't have time to react. And we talked about it. You can't hear that boat behind you.
No.
So if you don't look, I mean, I've looked and had boats, what you would say, like on your quarter panel, if it was a vehicle, like right there. I look and there's the front end of another bass boat.
That's crazy.
10 feet to my right.
Crazy.
And he's just running. And it's like, well, I'm not cutting there. So then you either got to throttle down or no, you got to do whatever you got to do.
There's no brake lights on a boat.
There's no way of knowing.
lights.
So if you're running, pay attention. One, if you're going to make a cut, look behind you and see if there's anybody there. Two, be smart if you're running in that pack. Everybody's in such a hurry to get to their spot. And I get it.
Here's another
But it's
one.
dangerous.
Here's another one with running. And we talked about this Friday with Emily, one of our brand ambassadors, when we did our Fishing Friday live, and she's a kayak angler. Like when we're on our bass boats and we see a kayak or even just another boat fishing up against the bank, unless you are going to throttle down and go to an idle like a quarter mile or several hundred yards before them, stay on pad and just blow past them, because actually there's a smaller wake when you're up on plane than if you try to slow down and you know it's not an idle through.
Yeah.
The bow of that boat is pushing. It's like a snow plow. It's just pushing all that water. So yeah, especially like boats like mine that come off pad terribly. It's like, rah, you know what I mean? Like it just plows water into them. So
I like that sound effect. We'll have to save that one. Yeah, that's a good point.
And then Pete, you did bring up something too. So Pete talked about running behind other boats. And I know we're kind of jumping around here, but these are unwritten. It's unwritten etiquette, so there's no way to stay on track. But it's not only for tournament fishing, but think about the summertime, right? You're running behind a wakeboard or kids on a tube. And I see this all the time. Bass boats will get up and they'll try to drift behind like they're Ricky Bobby, right? And doing a little shake and bake so that they don't catch those big waves, right?
Yeah.
But right in front of them, 50 feet, are two kids bebopping around on a. Well, here's the deal: they fall off, and you're going to run somebody over. So if you're that bass boat that's running 70 miles an hour and you just think it's cool to be behind a big wakeboard or a tube, like do yourself a favor, man. Like put yourself out of the running for running one of those kids over, right? And that's just unwritten. Right. Oh, yeah. Maybe it is the law. I don't know.
Yeah, just be safe.
Just be safe.
Some states do have like following distance laws, and you learn about that if you take a boater safety course. But
I don't have an issue about that, because if I see a wake boat, I try to go the other side.
I try to get as far away from them as I can.
I hate
if
those
you're
things.
a wake boater that listens to this, quit just running around when you're not towing anybody with them stupid things full, your ballast full, making wake for no reason. Come on, man. That's stuff, man. I hit a ghost wake on Gaston.
Ooh.
Running back to weigh in last year, and everything was out of the water. I was like, well,
I mean, they
it
look
was
like
like
a
Ricky
blast,
Bobby.
and they got to be fun.
Yeah.
But man, do I hate them when I'm fishing.
I appreciate some of the music they play.
And
Oh yeah.
And then on the water, just be
a good person.
I try to give everybody like 1,000 yards. So if they're fishing a point or fishing around a point or fishing a bank, and I want to fish the bank, I'm either going to pull in behind them 1,000 yards, or if they're fishing to something I want to fish, but it's 1,000 yards or so in front of them, I'll go in front of them. Don't cut 10 feet in front of a guy and start fishing or 15 feet in front of a guy. A couple stories of this. I just thought of another one. We talked about it earlier, but I was fishing Jordan one day, and I was fishing down a bank line on the river end. There's a little spot with some grass that I've had some luck in, so I'm fishing through this grass pocket. And all of a sudden, this dude comes blazing in on the other side, and I don't know, maybe 30 yards from me. Comes down, jumps up, runs up, drops his trolling motor, runs up and starts making casts. I'm fishing in, he's fishing in. And then he gets like 15 yards in front of me. He trolling motor straight across and then starts fishing down in front of me. So I'm talking loud enough to make sure that he knows that I'm there and can hear me without yelling at him directly. And he fishes back around to where he started. Well, I get right to where he cut in front of me, and I flip into the grass with a jig and two pop, and I caught about a 6.5 pounder right from where he had just fished. So he instantly trolling motored down and got back his boat and took off because he was mad.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because pretty much all tournaments, and like my hard and fast rule is I'm not going to pull up within 50 yards of somebody.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, I'm more like you, Pete. I don't want to be around
I don't wanna be
anybody.
around
I don't want to be around anybody.
But we know how sometimes fish set up in those schools and those community holes that sometimes you're going to be around people. But, 50 yards is my hard and fast rule unless you ask, right? Hey, you mind if I come in and right, just be cool and be nice about it. Be a good person. And they either say yes or no, and you just go about your day. But if you do want to fish a bank line and someone's there, fish behind them.
Yeah.
Because you can catch plenty of fish behind people.
Absolutely.
So
Fish behind yourself.
So that was
too.
karma.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah, that was two karma instances. That was karma for doing the right thing. Another story, and I've told this on a live, but I was fishing Jordan again, and we were at a tournament, and like Jordan can get early spring, there were 17 other tournaments going on the same day. So I'm fishing around a point, very clearly on the trolling motor, throwing a moving bait, and I'm moving. Well, a gentleman came blazing past me, cuts like 20 yards in front of me, sits down, jumps up, sits in a seat on the front while I puts his trolling motor, and then lights a cigarette. Now, this is like, in my defense, probably the fourth person that has cut me off on a point like that morning. Like the fourth different point I'm fishing.
And you just had enough?
And I had enough. So I let him know how I felt about it. And
Did you put a cigarette out?
Can we repeat that on this family friendly?
No, we'd have to change some settings in the podcast. It wasn't very godly of me the way I spoke to this man. And so I get done with my rant, and he's saying, "Well, I'm sorry. You don't have to cuss at me." And I'm continuing to be a jerk because I was mad. So I run back to the back and I crank the motor up, put her in drive, and floor down on the hot foot and start to go up on plane. And the next thing I know, this wake 6 foot high comes over the bow and just completely and totally drenches me. And I had left the trolling motor down. So here I am soaking wet. And my wife was fishing with me in the tournament. And I turn and look at her, and she just had this grin on her face. And I was like, I know. Don't even say anything. They got me instantly. We're good. But
Yeah, I mean, instant karma there. So if you do something bad on the water and screw up, be careful. You might get a boat full of water and get soaked. Yeah, I'm fortunate. I've never had too many bad instances. The only one I've had was that fall, summertime, fishing a point, and a pontoon boat came between me and the point. Right? He's not an angler. I just put my hands up, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you were there. I don't know how you didn't see me, but that stuff happens. It's frustrating. Like, you don't want to, those of us that fish, like, we don't want to cut people off where they're casting. Like, look to see where people are casting and that sort of thing. But
I have had anglers intentionally cut points that I'm fishing because they wanted to fish it, and I was there.
Yeah, that's just being a bad sport.
It was being a bad sport.
Bad sport.
So don't do that.
We've
don't
all
be like that. Come on.
Don't be that person.
Yeah.
We've all had those bad experiences in some way, shape, or form. But let's talk about how you react, right? Because that's part of the etiquette as well. So how we react in some of these situations, Pete and Ben talked about like getting cut off at points and wakeboarders and pontoon boaters and stuff like that. But, part of the etiquette, in my opinion, this is my opinion, is how we react to those situations, right? It's easy to fly off the handle. It's easy to start cursing people out. Sometimes it's necessary. I'm going to throw that out there. Sometimes you just need to give somebody a whole piece of your mind. But sometimes there's a lot of ignorance on the water, especially with people that aren't necessarily fishermen. I had a couple experiences, one of them being fishing up in southwestern Michigan, right? And a lot of those lakes in Michigan have docks on them, right? And we all know, we've all seen the viral videos. Heck, even Kyle Welcher just put one on TikTok where people are getting on him for creating a wake coming through an area because they live on those boats. And I thought he handled the situation really well. I mean, he composed himself, even though he was being belittled, being called a redneck, being called other things that I won't say.
Other R words,
right? But I was up fishing on a relatively small lake filled with hydrilla, just a beautiful lake. I mean, you can make a cast anywhere and catch a fish, but a lot of those fish were around the docks, right? And so I'm fishing around the docks, and of course I get a dock Karen that comes out and says, "Hey, you need to get off my property." And, I could have easily been like, you know what, like, you don't own the water, bro. But I just basically said, hey, listen, like, I'm just fishing, enjoying my time here. Now, she kept kind of getting at me, but what I did was I fished and moved on, right? There was no pressure in that situation, right? It wasn't a tournament. Now, that would have been a different situation. If I would have been fishing competitively for money, I may have handled the situation a little bit differently. Say, hey, listen, I'm fishing competitively. This is public water. That's the deal. But it wouldn't have done me or the person in the back of the boat any good if I just flew off the handle and start cursing this person out, because you know what? It's not worth it at that point, right?
I mean, yeah. And you probably would have handled it a little bit differently if you were catching fish there.
Yeah.
You know, I've had this similar situation.
I mean, I was, but keep going.
You were? Well,
yeah.
in that case.
I mean, they weren't like Jordan Lake 8.5 pounders. They were just like little cookie cutter bass, but still, you know, but keep going.
Yeah. I mean, you just want to be as professional, as nice about it as you can, and just try to explain, look, like usually, hey, I'm going to fish here. If I don't catch anything, I'll move on.
Yeah.
But we all know the deal. Like, you don't own the water. Actually, we were talking about this beforehand, but like, what's ironic about it, if they're on a core lake, like they don't even own the land, their shoreline.
Yeah.
You legally can walk around the entire shoreline of a core lake, regardless if there's docks and houses in close proximity and all.
I don't think they own the dock either, do they?
Yeah, well, I don't know all the lakes. Because I'm thinking like a Bull Shoals.
Okay.
And there's only so many spots on the lake can have a dock, and I think you do own it, but you have to move it.
You
But
lease
anyway,
the land essentially.
yeah, and but there's a take line around the entire body of water. Not all lakes are like that, of course, but now we're getting off on a tangent.
No.
So,
I mean, it comes down to like if you're a bank fisherman, know the rules of the body of water you're going to fish, because there might be opportunities there.
Bank fishing. We haven't even talked about bank fishing.
I mean, I don't have a lot of etiquette stuff for bank fishing. I will say if I'm fishing and I come across a guy that's bank fishing, I will avoid that area that he's fishing as much as I can. I'm not going to come up and flip into a bush that he's fishing or.
I wasn't even thinking about being on the boat, but yes, absolutely. I tried to completely go around and avoid bank anglers because they are limited. They're stuck basically where they're at.
Yeah.
And I can go anywhere on the lake. But for bank angler etiquette, if you want to fish, you just go ask people if it's private property. You'd be surprised the number of people who might say yes. And then when you do that, or even if it's a public thing, just pick up trash.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yes.
Just make it better and go have fun and catch your fish.
We see it on Jordan. You know, certain crowds of people when the crappie under the bridge is really heavy, and they'll come sit on the riprap, and you go in there on a Monday, and there's half-empty cases of beer shoved in the rocks, and you know they just trash the place. Don't be like that. If you want to go catch crappie and drink, that's cool. Like have fun, but take your stuff with you.
I'm not gonna lie, like
it's a whole. If you bring it with you, take it home.
Yeah, and so that goes from etiquette to just breaking the damn law, right? Like I make it a point to carry like industrial sized trash bags in my boat, at least one of them with me, because I'm not gonna not grab beer cans that are floating across the water bottles and stuff. That stuff happens. I know it blows out of my boat too. I make a point to turn around and go pick it up if I see it. But if you see that kind of stuff, like, and you're not fishing competitively and time's not on the line and money's not on the line, like make our fisheries better, right? Yeah. Just do your due diligence, make our fisheries better. And I always do that.
It goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, right? We're all trying to make our fisheries better. That's a very simple way to do that.
That is. And I will say this too. If you see somebody trashing the shorelines, frickin' call the Wildlife Commission and report them, right? Make them pay, make them take accountability for being like bad people. And I've done it before. Like if I see somebody literally just chucking out Ozark Trail things that they bought from Walmart and they're just trash everywhere, I'll literally get on the phone with a game warden and be like, hey, this is happening right now. You know, like these people need to be held accountable for this, because we're held accountable for our actions as well, right? Especially in tournaments when the game warden walks up and says, let me see your fishing license. Hey, here's my fishing license. Right? I pay this, right? So that we can continue pumping money into our fisheries. So the etiquette's there. You may not know it, but it's basically common sense. And then there's the law. Follow the law, right? It goes a long way. And the last thing I'll say, because we jumped to bank fishing, but this is for all boating in general or just being on the water. There are so many kids that are on these boats with people that the way that you behave is going to send either a good or bad message to how they're going to grow up.
Yep.
Right? How you react to a situation where somebody cuts you off, how you react to a situation where somebody's cursing you out, whatever the case may be. So, dude, like be a good person and make sure that you're not creating a trend of bad behavior as we continue to try to make our fisheries better. So
that's perfect. I got nothing else. I mean, that's like that perfect way
Yeah,
to
yeah.
just be a good person.
Be a good person.
Be a good person. Be courteous. We were going to talk about like the ramp when you're when you're loading. At the end of the day, there's not really much there. Wait your turn.
Yeah.
Don't cut in front of other people.
Reverse order.
Get your boat on the trailer and pull away and go strap everything down. And
I will say, pull your plug, drain your water out. Right. If you got a bunch of grass and stuff caught up in the inlet in your outboard, clean it out. Spray your boat off. Make sure you're not transporting stuff. Be a good person.
Yeah. That nailed it. Ben, what you got? Closing.
Hit that music.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.